Hi, Get Unstuck Nation. So today I have something different from others because you know that usually we do service-based, but today we also bring you the new expert that have the product success. So I would like to introduce David Fradin. He is Spice Catalyst. He's from Spice Catalyst. He's the owner and founder there. So he has over 50 years of experience in product success, including HP and Apple. You guys, I'm so excited. So please welcome David with me here. Thank you for joining Get Unstuck Radio today.
Well, thanks for putting up with me.
David, before we get into how to do product success or what are the keys, can you please tell us a little bit why you become an entrepreneur?
I think I left the corporate world in the early 1990s because I was just feeling that corporations or the people in the corporations were more interested in their personal self-advancement to the detriment of their team members, to the other employees, and less concerned about customer satisfaction. So going out on my own and being a consultant and training people how to do product success and product management. If I don't like a client, I can fire the client instead of getting fired myself.
I agree. I really agree on that. That is something that I do often as well.
But that's changed a lot in the last, say, 5 to 10 years with the increasing focus, almost 100% focus of many major corporations on customer satisfaction, led by such companies as Apple and Amazon and others. If you buy something from Amazon and you don't like it, you contact them through their website and you say, I don't like this, and they just give you your money back. And make it very, very easy for you to send the product back to them. And that's now invaded many, many companies and many, many different industries, the focus on product success and on customer satisfaction.
So do you think customer satisfaction, I mean customer fulfillment or customer delivery, whatever they're going to call it, there are too many names, involve with the company culture?
Oh, very much so. And the culture is an amalgamation of the values of the company and the vision of the company. And then as the pursuit of that vision, that mission statement, and the values and the following of the values of the company over a period of time, that creates the company culture. For example, one of the values of Apple was empathy for the customer. One of the values of HP under the HP way is is customer satisfaction. The customer comes first. So that pervades the overall thinking and decision making of everybody in the company, and that eventually creates the culture.
Yeah, because I work with like from solopreneur to become having a team, or they are still startup stage. I try to tell them that you have to determine what is the end goal of this particular product or service that you are working on. Because if not, you wouldn't know how to serve them exactly what they want, apart from you know who they are. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to streamline and get themselves out of here and then starting the new project, right? To like having the next product or next service line or something like that. And once the longer you stay in this hamster wheel, the longer you couldn't do that. You couldn't work on the business instead. So that's a very good point. Like I think the starter or the startup for entrepreneur not really think that long-term game. They might want cash flow at the beginning, but actually if they really want this company to work, they have to think long-term. What is your opinion on that?
Well, the very first thing an entrepreneur should do is adopt a set of values for their business. And I've got some sample values up on my website, spicecatalyst.com. I've got Apple's values there. I've got the old HP way there. And I have my own values, which is an enhancement of a combination of those two sets of values. That should be the very first thing that they do. Then the second thing they should think about is what's the vision of the company? What's the mission of the company? What are they trying to accomplish? Now, that does not have to be a specific product. In fact, the vision statement for HP when they were started in 1938 was very specifically, we will not at this time make a decision as to what product we are going to build. What we will do is offer a technical contribution to the economy. So the result of that was the development and the building of an audio oscillator. And their first sale was 8 of these units to Walt Disney to do the music for Fantasia. And that's how they eventually evolved into being an instrumentation company that built instruments that other engineers would use to test and monitor other things. When a professor at Stanford used to ask his MBA students, what did you think of that vision statement of we will make a technical contribution, but we won't decide what the product is? These MBA students rated that on a scale of 1 to 10, typically at a scale of 3. They thought it was a lousy vision statement. Yet that vision statement for HP guided them for over 50 years until they got rid of that vision statement and blew up their values, their HP way, in the late 90s. But for that 50 years, they, or more than 50 years, they increased sales 20% a year every year for that entire period from 1938 to 1998. So that's why I stress values and a vision statement. And values also pertains to an individual. When I was writing my books, Building Insanely Great Products, and the second little volume that Wiley published last year called Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit. Both of these are available on Amazon. I researched the first 500 companies in the Fortune 500. And I was very familiar with many of those companies personally because when I was in college, I had started a national student organization, first in support of the development of an American supersonic transport, and then later for support of science and technology. Because in the early 70s, the general thinking or feeling in the United States is that the environmental crisis was caused by technology. But I, as an engineering student at University of Michigan, knew that technology is defined as nothing more than the organization of knowledge for practical purposes. The technology itself or the science itself is not responsible for the problems. The problems are caused by the people that implement or fail to implement the technology. So I knew all these companies, and I went through and developed a list. Which of these companies have values and which of these companies did not, and which of these companies were still in business some 50 years later, and which of them were not. Turned out that about 300 plus of them had gone out of business, and almost without exception, those companies had no values. Those companies that did have values continued to thrive and persist around the time that I did that research around 2014, 2015. And I said, well, I wonder if this issue of values pertains to me personally. So I made a list of the 25 organizations that I've been associated with through my career. I started the Flying Club at the University of Michigan, and it's still going today. They have trained over 5,000 pilots that fly airlines now throughout the world. And then this student organization in support of science and technology. And then I was one of the first environmental mediators in the world and helped resolve some major environmental disputes before I joined HP and Apple recruited me, and then a number of organizations after that. And I made a list. Did these organizations have values? Did they follow the values? And did those values map into my values? And 20 of them, those 3 conditions did not exist. And without exception, those 20 organizations were places that either I got fired from and the next day I felt better, or I quit and the next day I felt better. But the 5 organizations like HP and Apple and others that had values and followed those values, I was very, very happy with. So I mentioned this to a friend of mine. You can see in the background, that's the view from my Maui Wailea condo, which I rent out when I'm not there. It's about 100 feet from the ocean. My former property manager moved to Northern California, and I told him, when you pick your next job, be sure you pick your job that matches into your values. And he called me up one day and he says he went out in an interview and he talked for 4 hours to the hiring managers at a company about values. They hired him, and this was a few weeks later, and he was very, very happy there. Now you contrast that with a company like Volkswagen, who a few years ago had a very wonderful set of values, including caring for the environment and caring for their customer. But some of their senior level managers directed and hid the emissions scandal, where when you plug their diesel cars in to the emission checking devices, like at the state smog check places, the software code would execute and record false numbers. That scandal cost several years to uncover, and several of their senior executives got into a whole lot of trouble over it. And they've pledged to build out a $10 billion electric charging station network in the United States. And I know another one in Europe, and plus the hit on their brand, the promise of that company actually caring for the environment. I would guesstimate it cost them about $30 billion for failing to follow the values that they said that they had. So that's why I say values in the first formation of an organization, of any kind of business, whether you're developing and delivering products or services, is so critical.
That makes so much sense. But in terms of small business, then, how can they apply this? Like small business, in terms of like small businesses, SME, small medium businesses, or family businesses, how can they apply these and make their business more sustainable? Or they have to scale at the point to become enterprise or corporate. Therefore, they could have like a better legs in that sense. What are the difference here?
No difference. The same set of values would apply if it's a family business who cares about their employees, or they can be a big enterprise that can also care about their employees and their customers, and honesty and good management, and those kinds of things, which are typical of the HP way and Apple values. Another example of how horrible things can get if you don't have values is just this nightmare we just got over with Trump as president. A person that has no values whatsoever. The only thing he's into is whatever is good for him. And if people leave his employ, he attacks them. He doesn't care about them. All he does is care about himself. A person that has no values, that if people from Nicaragua or Guatemala, the Golden Triangle, are trying to escape a couple of hurricanes, corruption, the cocaine cartel, and criminals, to get a better life for their children, and they come across the U.S. border, and under international law, if I set foot in Thailand, for example, and said, I want asylum, Thailand has to grant me that asylum. Same thing's true in the United States. But he has no values and didn't follow that. So he locked up little babies in cages for extended periods of time. So that's another example of why values are so important. And when I pick politicians that I vote for, I ask that same question. Do they have values? And do they follow those values?
I agree though. I mean, in terms of like bringing the right people that resonate with myself, like that is not selfish, but it's just the way that I feel like I can trust that person because they share something the same as me.
Exactly. And when you go into a room with them, or now when you go into a Zoom with them, and you are trying to make a decision about something, you know that everybody involved in making that decision were coming from the same place, from the same set of values.
Yeah. I always have new decision making next to the water. Like either I go for the ocean trip or the sea beach. Yeah, I always get new inspiration, and I keen to stay next to the water more because of that. I have peace with me and I can make decision easier. Yeah, I agree on the same place, but not like exactly the same spot, but similar environment. I think that's also involved like a yin yang thing, something like these nature laws are very integrate, let's say, in some way to explain. But I think it makes sense somehow. Not really a true believer, but like so far. I mean, my life is just like half of your experience. So I'm very interested to learn more. I mean, you already shared with me the golden information of like people at my age wouldn't know. And we wouldn't, if those like me, not yet able to read the history and not familiar with it, I couldn't compare that like back for 50 years. That's gonna be crazy. Like from your experience and amount of research that you have done. So I think I'm gonna buy your book. It's very interesting. Sold. Anyway, let's get into what you really specialize in. Product success. What? So I think everyone knows here that I don't like product. However, I also just launched my clothing line with my mom, and it's a headache for me as well as a service person for the past 3 years, 4 years. That I always say that I will not stay in the product industry because I don't want to do inventory. It's me. So I prefer to get headache with operating system back in for the e-commerce rather than have my own. But now I have my own. I understand the chaos and also the anxious that happening that involved with other factors and stakeholder that like this one have to wait this time and I have to manage the whole timeline when I could launch, when I could release the product. And man, I can tell you, I don't really like it. I still stick to my service, but because my mom encouraged me, so I just do it with her. What exactly the difference between service management and product management in your opinion?
Difference between product management and what was the first thing?
Service-based company.
Service management?
Service.
Not understand.
SERVICE.
Oh, service. A product is something that's tangible that you can touch. A service is also a product. It just happens to be intangible. You can't touch it. And the basic principles of product success apply to both.
This episode is sponsored by Mutita Clothing, like what I'm wearing right here. So if you are a petty sized lady who are looking for high quality apparels as well as a neat cutting and premium pattern, check it out at mutitaclothing.com so that you can be simply elegant by no time. Let's get back to the episode. I agree again. It's have their own like the way of thinking. Do you think because you have engineering background help you to re-engineer this thing and able to get it more structuralized?
Yeah, the main thing that an engineer learns in engineering school is how to solve problems through the scientific method of identifying the problem, analyzing the problem, getting agreement as to what the problem is, identifying solutions, testing those solutions against those problems, and then picking the best solution, as opposed to jumping in and doing something. And that's pretty much the way product development should occur. And that's why I came up with the 5 or 6 keys to product success, which maps into the word of my company's name, SPICE. And it's actually mnemonic. The S stands for strategy, and there it's a product market strategy, of which there are 32 major and minor elements. Values is one of the first ones of your product market strategy. This is the strategy for the product in the particular market that you've selected. Then you go out and figure out what is the problems that your product or service is trying to resolve. And I call that understanding what it is that your customer wants to do. Because you can't go out, as Steve Jobs said, and ask people what do they need, because they don't know what they need. A story is that Henry Ford, the inventor of the mass manufactured automobile in the United States, allegedly went out and asked people in my hometown where I grew up, Detroit, hi, would you like to have a car? And people said, no, I just want a faster horse. But if he had observed what it is that people were doing, whipping their horse to go from point A to point B faster, or to move their little horse-drawn cart faster so they can get their goods to market faster, he would have known that people were looking for a solution to that problem, and they had a need for a car or an automobile, but they just didn't know what to call it at that time. So that's the second major element of the product market strategy. The third one is understanding the personas of who you're going to be selling the product or service to, and quantifying that and qualifying that and describing it. And then you do your market research and your competitive research, which enables you to do one of the most important things that a product manager does, and that's called product positioning. And that's a place in the mind of the prospective customer. And that's what people think of when you first hear that particular company or that particular product. It's the brand, it's the promise. Then with all that in hand, you can put together what is the features that you need to develop, what are the advantages, what's the distribution strategy, the sales strategy, what is the pricing strategy, what's the support and service strategy. And then, excuse me, then you turn that over to development. And then all of those is a foundation for the use of marketing. Going through all that is the P in SPICE, having a repeatable process, with the I in SPICE, which is the information you need to make decisions along the way. The C in SPICE is understanding the customer, going back to understanding what it is the customer wants to do. And the E in SPICE is the employees, providing the training for the employees to be able to have product success. In my Wiley book, I've identified 132 competencies or skill sets an organization and or an individual must have in order to have a successful product or service. Most organizations, no matter how small or how large, lack a number of those key competencies. And as in that case, they should recognize that and reach out to consultants and other experts in that particular area to help them out.
What are the things that I noticed from the small business side? They not really know what they don't know.
That's correct. And that's when they make major mistakes, usually fatal ones. For example, one of my mistakes was I've given credit for inventing advertising on a cell phone in 2003. And since I own this condo in Maui since 2001, one of the great pastimes there is you ride up to the top of Haleakala, the volcano that created the island. And then you get on a bike and you coast down from Haleakala to Paia or Kahului and have a champagne brunch. So I had a little video game developed for the cell phone called Maui Mountain Biking. And when you crash or fall off of Haleakala, an ad would come up and say, this crash was brought to you by Zeal running shoes or Zeal Optics. And then I tried to raise money from venture capitalists or seed investors. And I talked to over 200 of them, and I couldn't find a single one of these prospective investors that understood advertising, cell phones, and games. So I couldn't raise any capital. Today, it's over a $15 billion a year industry or more. And because I had not found 15 unmet needs, things that people wanted to do on a cell phone at that particular time, other than making phone calls, the market was not there yet. So the lesson I learned is I was way ahead of my market. The other lesson is this little Maui mountain biking game I could get distributed because it ran on a Nokia phone in Europe. And I had over 10,000 installations, but my sales force was only in the United States. And so I had a disconnect in my distribution. My sales force and advertisers in the US could care less about advertising in Europe, but that's where I had my ad inventory, my distribution. If I had known that ahead of time, I could have avoided that mistake, and Maui Games would still be in business today.
Wow. But how can
And
you
that
know before you make those decisions?
you write your product market strategy, which will take at least 3 to 6 people months of effort, and probably at least 1 to 3 person months of personal effort, 3 to 6 calendar months, because of the time it takes to put it together. What most people do in most organizations is they try to skip as much of that as possible, along the idea of some venture capitalists and angel investors have talked about, called ready, fire, aim, rather than ready, aim, fire. And they also talk about it in terms of fail fast, which is not good if you haven't figured out all the elements I mentioned earlier in terms of your product market strategy. I have to apologize for my cats. They're feral cats that I adopted, and they're 18 and a half years old.
18?
And that one, 18 and a half, yeah. And that one, his name is Jack. When you hold him and purr, and he's beginning to hallucinate around this time at night and early in the morning. And we're giving him pain pills to calm him down, but that doesn't seem to be working. So he's got an appointment at the vet tomorrow.
Oh, 18. Wow. That's already old cat. He or she, sorry?
It's a he, and he has a sister, also 18 and a half, that's going to have dental surgery tomorrow.
Oh, that's gonna be a big one. I binge watching Bobby Wet this day because I have a new dog as well. She's just 5 months old. So yeah, I love animals. Anyway, no worries. We live in work from home this time, so I think everyone understands. Yeah, I mean, I think there are two types of consultants or coaches this day that like in the market. One of them would be those implementer, I would call them. They would prefer you to take action rather than strategize first. Like you have to have something as a minimal requirement product or some ideas that you want to do and then pre-sell it before you make it. That is one type. Another type would be those who suggest you to have foundation clear, spend more time on it, and then really able to make this thing more sustainable. So I still couldn't find the middle of these two. Like it's a bit too extreme for me, in my opinion. That's what I have seen in the past 4 years. But I trying to find the middle of these two, like along the way that you can get cash flow on something. Because I believe small business having that issue, or startup, they having this issue that, for example, software development costs a lot of money. If they not do some the funding or anything, it's gonna be in their pocket, and at the end it could get into their bones. So yeah, what would you suggest? I think from your side, the SPY method would be the second types of consultant that like get things clear before you do it, get it right, and enter the market with the right fit. Am I correct?
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. HP has, as part of their culture, called management by wandering around, and also the next bench syndrome. That is, if they developed an instrument, they would take it to the next bench, which is usually another test engineer, and get feedback immediately from the prospective customer on that product. And make like an agile form of incremental improvements. And that's another one of the reasons, in addition to the values, that HP grew 20% a year every year for 50 years. A bad example of that is a company called Digital FX, which is no longer in business. And Kleiner Perkins, who was one of the premier venture capital firms in the world, placed me there as the second product manager. And they thought this desktop product that they had developed called Video FX, which plugged into a Macintosh computer, is just the thing that all Mac users would want in order to produce videos. Well, they then spent $30 million with Hitachi in Korea to build these video effects products, which was a video switcher, a character generator, and a machine controller all in one box, and went out and tried to sell it. And they thought it was going to sell in the same volumes as video cards were selling on PCs then, to the tune of thousands to tens of thousands per month. It turned out they're only selling about 10 or 20 a month. And they had no idea who their customer was. So as their second product manager, I went out and I talked with 20 of our best customers and found out that they were not Macintosh users. In fact, most of them could, before they got their video effects product, couldn't find the on switch for Macintosh. They were videographers that most of them had 4-year degrees in videography and video production. And their value proposition, which the company knew nothing about, was that the video effects product reduced the cost of a post-production suite from $150,000 to about $75,000. That was the product market fit, but the people in the company and the people on the board and the funders, the venture capital funders, had no idea that that's what the special sauce would be. So for someone to go out and say, oh, you just have to decide what your special sauce is. All you have to do is the minimum viable product. All you have to do is do product market fit. All you have to do is ready, fire, aim. Well, you're not going to figure that out that way. You have to go out and listen to your customer, observe what your customer does, like the HP next bench syndrome, and make adjustments as you learn more about what's going on in the marketplace.
Another thing, that's a very good point. I mean, everyone get Unstuck Nation. I think this interview, you have to take notes because you're not going to be able to listen to this thing every single day. So keep watching this, rewatch it, and take note. That would be my recommend. Sorry?
Or you can buy my books.
Oh yeah, that also. Check your website. Website is in the description. Another thing that I noticed though, this is something that dear to my heart, like very dear to my heart. Why the executive board or like business owner in general, either small or big, I believe the bigger the enterprise, they're able to streamline and keep doing what works in that business. Like they have that strong call already. But HP, for example, they have one of the printer that I really like, the 3-in-1 scan, printing and copy. They're not selling it anymore. And I don't know why. It really works well and it's really cheap, like 20 pounds at that time. I was in the UK. Excuse me. Excuse me. So, yeah, I always, oh, sorry.
They hired a lady that was a good salesperson from the old AT&T before the government broke it up. Her name was Carly Farina. And all she cared about was her own self-aggrandizement and the price of the stock so that she could get rich. And she blew up the HP values around 1998. And Dave Packard's son, who was on the board, resigned from the board and ran a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal saying she's going to destroy this company. After her, they hired a guy that was involved in a scandal of a major merger and acquisition of a company out of the Netherlands or something like that. And after that, just before that, they hired a guy from National Cash Register, who was a financial guy. And he got involved in a inappropriate affair scandal, resigned. And then they hired Meg Whitman, who was from Goldman Sachs, also a finance person, who had run eBay for a little while, which was a business to consumer kind of business. And HP was a business to business and also a business to consumer company, and smart enough that when they did the consumer products like that printer that you just mentioned, they did it in a separate autonomous division, which had full authority over the product line, had its own engineering, had its own development, had its own marketing, had its own product management, had its own manufacturing, had its own human resources, had its own finance. And those divisions of HP, by decree, again, part of the HP culture, would never get over 500 people so that they could always stay close to the customer. So HP recognized early on, as they went from a B2B instrumentation company, and Carly spun off that into a separate company whose name escapes me right now, which is really the old HP, Agilent. And then under Meg Whitman, she spun off the HP consumer business, including PCs and printers, and kept the enterprise business, which is consulting and services, sort of competing directly with IBM services and Tata services out of India, and Infosys out of India, and Cognizant, and those kinds of things. So it's different. It's a different company now in terms of the markets that it goes after, and they probably felt that the printer business, they were not going to be able to compete with the likes of Canon and perhaps some Chinese and Korean companies that excel in terms of their product market strategy to be the low-cost manufacturer. And also, it appears that HP did not have much interest in developing the external outsourcing manufacturing model that Apple adopted by using Foxconn and other outsourced manufacturing that could focus on manufacturing technologies, supplying a supply chain, while Apple focused on the products themselves and on customer service and support, and managing the supply chain and the distribution chain.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is depends on the financial goal, I believe. Yeah, because at the end of the day, I mean, money still, they have to feed a lot of people, right? They are the big enterprise, and those numbers have to be hit at least or exceed. So
here's the war that's going on. Is it shareholder value, customer satisfaction, or taking care of your employees? I believe, like Apple does, if they take care of their employees and take care of their customers, the profits will just follow. And that has happened. That's why the company is the most valuable company in the world. HP followed the same kind of thing for those same 50 years. And that was another part of the special sauce as to why HP grew 20% a year every year for 50 years. They didn't worry about profits. They felt that their obligation was to their community, to their employees, and to their customers. And the last place would be Wall Street. And that's been typified over, say, the last 5 years in terms of the value of Apple stock, because it was in a discrete products business, the iPhone, the iPad, the Macintosh, and so forth. Wall Street gave it a price earnings rating ratio of about 12 or 16 to 1. But Amazon, especially after they came out with Amazon Prime, they have hundreds of millions of people like me paying $129 a year, whether I use it or not. Amazon turned themselves into a big subscription services business. Google, services business. Facebook, services business. And some of those companies have 40, 50, 60 to 1 price earning ratios, because the financial geniuses of Wall Street feel that that's a more valuable business to be in. And since Apple started doing its services of iCloud, Apple Music, Apple Arcade, Apple News, and so forth, and then started bundling them in the last year so you can get more of them for the cost of the individual components, their services revenues have been exploding. And as a result of that, the Apple stock price has been going up and up and up. And under full disclosure, I own stock in Apple, Amazon, and the 3M company. And I picked those stocks because they have values, and they follow those values.
Yeah. So it actually depends on the market growth as well.
To some extent, the market should be growing, but there are examples of companies in established markets where it's not growing, and a company can jump in with the right strategy and dominate and earn a good return on investment.
Mm.
I'll give you an example. I'm also invested in Vinmilk, which is a dairy producer distributor in Vietnam. And they've been going gangbusters over the last year, high quality products, predominantly for the Vietnamese market, but they also distribute worldwide. And they care about their customers, they care about their farmers, they care about everything, and the stock market takes care of the rest for them.
Mm. Yeah. This always like run along the curve of like innovation. What is that one? I forgot the name already.
The innovation curve, the
Yeah.
curve of adoption.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm model. So in Vinmilk's example, they jumped in since milk has been adopted. All of the laggards and the mass market is there, and they've come in with the better product, and I think also with better distribution, and that's why they're beginning to dominate that market. Apple doesn't jump right in with every first new product. It took them 10 to 15 years before they got into the phone business. And they didn't jump in until you had the technical capability of having the internet in your pocket. And that's the way Steve described the first iPhone. The tablet business was around for a number of years, not going anywhere, but he came up with the notion of being able to consume media any place and anywhere with this little tablet, building off of the tablet's introduction to the world in the science fiction television series of the 60s called Star Trek.
Yeah. Right timing is very important. Okay. Thank you for the knowledge bomb today. But David, in case anyone, if they're listening to here, if they want to follow you or even work with you, where can they reach out to you then?
Just go to my website at spicecatalyst.com. Feel free to send me an email. My email address is there, dave@spicecatalyst.com. Follow me at LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn and look up David Fradin, and you can find my LinkedIn URL there, or you can get that off my website, spicecatalyst.com.
Thank you so much for joining Get Unstuck Radio today.
Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe here or here. And this is the previous episode. Check it out. See you next time.